Okay, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. As you can probably have told or could see, I am not here today, but I did not think that that was necessarily something that would keep me from giving my lesson, so that's what we're doing today. So basically what we're doing is going over a review of your language arts exam, which will be December 17th, which is 2 weeks from today. So that might seem like it's not that far away, and that's because it is not that far away. Okay, so we need to begin studying for that. We need to begin compiling materials for that. So that's what we're working on today. I thought that it might be a good idea just to get together all of the materials that we need, talk about all the skills that are going to be expected of you, and then I will go ahead and introduce the project that you will do over this material to help you with your review. So let's start with the basics. Your language arts exam will be anywhere from 100 to 120 questions. It will be within that realm. It will be probably closer to 120 than it will be to 120 or 100, but it will probably fall somewhere in between there. It might be 120. I would probably bank on that. However, regardless if it's out of 115 or 117, I will grade it out of 120. This exam will cover all aspects of language arts that we have completed over this quarter, or both quarters over this semester, um, and will encompass all the materials on all of your tests and quizzes. So, that is what your exam will be, sort of in a nutshell. So let's begin discussing what your exam will encompass. So just going to take this test by test. So your first test was over nouns, pronouns, and adjectives. If you remember, nouns, pronouns, and adjectives. And it covered the following materials. So these are the materials that were covered on your first exam. Specifically, I asked you to find different types of nouns. So it's going to be sort of your prerogative to understand the different types of nouns: common, proper, collective, abstract, compound, and concrete. So all of those are up for grabs. I'm going to, and it'll look a lot like your test. I'll have sentences that have an italicized noun or a type of noun, and I'll say find all those nouns in this type of sentence. So you'll have nouns and basically identifying types of nouns, and pretty much the same for the pronouns. So you'll have to be able to identify different types of pronouns as well, including personal, intensive, reflexive, demonstrative, interrogative, and indefinite. Once again, you will probably see sentences where I say, find these types of pronouns in this type of sentence. And then, of course, adjectives, you'll have to identify them and find what they modify. So that's what was covered in your first test. So yeah, I would probably tell you that the questions on your exam are probably going to look a lot like the questions on your test, probably more so than the questions on your quizzes. So, but that does not mean that the quizzes are not something that you will need to study from. Okay, so the second test is going to cover verbs, adverbs, prepositions, conjunctions, and interjections. Probably the most difficult part about this test is going to be verbs. So the idea is you'll have to be able to identify verbs or verb phrases and tell me whether they're transitive verbs, intransitive verbs, or linking verbs. Then, of course, with adverbs, you will have to find them and tell me what the adverbs are modifying. Prepositions, finding prepositions objects of the prepositions and prepositional phrases, and then of course with interjections and conjunctions, just being able to identify those. So if I say, especially on those sections of your test where I give you a word, italicize, and then I say, tell me what its part of speech is, really in those sections is the only place where you're going to run into interjections and conjunctions, but you should be able to identify them in a sentence. So really for this test, it's the verbs that's probably the most difficult. Verbs and adverbs. Finding adverbs can be difficult as well. But don't slouch on these other parts of speech because they will also be parts of the test. And that's really either you know it or you don't. And if you don't know it, that's one or two wrong that could have been right, if you took the time to sort of review that material. The next test, of course, is the dreaded complements, which most of you had the most issues with. And that's something that maybe you need to think about. Basically, when I say think about, I mean you need to think about it in the sense that, if you struggled with this one the most, and you sort of you have to section off your studying into 4 sections, perhaps this is the section that you need to spend the most time on and do the most practice over. So obviously this is about finding direct and indirect objects and predicate nominatives and predicate adjectives, which is all about basically how something complements a verb. I've kind of broken it down for you as to how to do this. Find the verb, identify the verb. If you have a linking verb, linking verbs will always have a complement, so really it's just you looking in the predicate and finding whether you have nouns or pronouns or adjectives, and then being able to identify nouns or pronouns or adjectives in the predicate, and then labeling them as such. So if you have a linking verb, you're always going to have some kind of subject complement after it. Action verbs, of course, have objects after them. Who or what is receiving the action of the verb is a direct object. For who, for what, to whom, or to what is how you find indirect objects. Indirect objects are always between the verb and the direct object. So once again, if this is something that you struggled with, then this is definitely something that I would probably put my energies to study fully. But finally, the last test you guys took was over agreement. So subject-verb agreement and pronoun antecedent agreement, kind of things that you have to worry about there is that they have to agree in number, and for pronoun and antecedent, they have to agree in gender. Things you have to look out for: compound subjects in antecedents, indefinite pronouns, prepositional phrases. So those are all things that you have to look out for. Now, I graded your tests, and they should have been handed back today. And you guys did pretty well on it overall. So that's another thing that you need to really think about when you're studying for an exam: how well you do on a subject, and how much time you need to spend studying for that based on how well you do. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean forget it altogether. That basically means, this is the newest test, meaning that it's the latest one, I guess I should say. And it is the test that is the freshest in my brain. And oh, by the way, I did pretty well on it. So if that's the case, then maybe you don't spend as much time on it as you spend on a material that we did earlier in the year, just because that material is not as fresh, or material that we did earlier that you did not do so well on. So that's another thing that you need to think about in terms of study. So these are all of our topics, okay, and you should have maybe written them down in a way to put a study guide together. The next question is, what are we going to do for these topics? I had mentioned a project. Well, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to break off into groups of 4, so 16 people with 4 in each group. And basically, instead of me sort of taking a day to do review material, you guys are going to review together by putting together a review Jeopardy game for everybody. So that's the assignment. You're going to put together a review Jeopardy game, and you are going to present the review Jeopardy game to the rest of the class. So how that's going to work is, first, as I said, I'm going to break you off into groups, which I have already done. So group 1 takes test 1, so nouns, pronouns, and adjectives, and group 1 is going to be Adam, Gino, Lucy, and Colleen. Group 2, verbs, adverbs, prepositions, conjunctions, and interjections. That's going to be Imelda, Matthew, Hodge, Abby, and Emily. Group 3 is going to be over compliments, and that's going to be Jackson, Matthew, Musial, Anna, and Julie. And then group 4 is going to do agreement, and that's going to be Jenna, Ellie, Lucas, and Ava. So let's take a look at what this looks like. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to type in the website that you're going to use. It's called Jeopardy Labs. So I'll put this on your Google Classroom, but essentially you're going to use this as a way to put together your Jeopardy game. So you don't have to log in or join. All you have to do is create a Jeopardy game, and it's going to say quick build, no account required. Create a password for your Jeopardy game. If you want to edit it, you'll need to remember the password. So you'll create a password. So we'll say password, and then we'll say start building. And then you're going to be able to begin doing it. So you'll have instructions. Basically, this is where you'll write the instructions, and then you'll do categories, and then for each question, you'll do your questions. Now, this is pretty user-friendly. You know, multiple people can be working it at one time. When you pick a title, please make sure that it is a very unique title, because if you just put something like verbs, you know, there's 8 million other Jeopardy games called verbs, and it's going to be very difficult for you to find if you just name it that. So you're going to have to really name it something unique so that when you go back to it, or if you want to edit it and you search for it, you're going to have the ability to do that. So that's it for today. What I'm going to let you do is, after this, you are going to get into your groups, and you're going to be able to begin working on your Jeopardy. You may use questions that we have already gone over, questions from your test, questions from quizzes, questions from homework assignment. You can search the internet for questions. Whatever you want to do, you can categorize them in any way that you want. It is necessary that you have at least 5 categories with 5 questions each, but you could add more if you want to, but that is not necessary. This will be a quiz grade, and it will be, if completed, that you will get the grade. So complete it, and the questions, of course, have to be correct and have to deal with your topics. So that is your assignment, and you may have the remainder of this class to work on this assignment. I would suggest planning it, giving certain members of the group certain topics, so that you're just not all doing what you want. You know, it's a group project, so that aspect of it is still there. So if you want to split topics between group members, that's probably the easiest way to do it. So once again, you may work on this for the remainder of class. I will see you tomorrow, and tomorrow we will discuss your Animal Farm project and finish reading Chapter 9, Chapter 9, and I will also collect your Animal Farm homework for Chapter 8 tomorrow, so have that ready. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you tomorrow.